Hey beautiful, have you considered subscribing to our channel? Help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers.
The afternoon sun cast golden shafts of light across our backyard, warming the lavender bushes my grandmother had planted with trembling hands just weeks earlier. Bees buzzed lazily around the blooms. The faint scent of rosemary drifted from the herb beds. I was halfway through an iced coffee and thinking about nothing in particular when the scream shattered the stillness. It wasn't a scream of surprise. It was raw, sharp, and terrified. I dropped my cup, glass shattering against the patio, and ran toward the sound. There, by the bird bath, stood my grandmother. Her shoulders were hunched, her body shaking, one hand covering her mouth as if to keep in the sobs that were already escaping. Her silver-gray hair, normally curled into soft waves, was uneven, jagged in places, as if someone had attacked it with hedge clippers. Strands of it littered the grass at her feet like dead petals. Standing across from her, a smug half-smile. On her face was Karen. HOA President Karen. Forever in a beige pantsuit, clipboard practically stapled to her hand, voice like a smoke alarm. She held a pair of shears. Not gardening shears, hair shears. My stomach dropped. "What the hell did you do?" I shouted, closing the distance between us. Karen didn't even blink. "I was helping," she said, as if she'd just watered a plant or picked up a bit of trash. Her hair was a mess, totally unkempt. It reflects poorly on the neighborhood. My grandmother stared at the ground. Silent tears traced the wrinkles on her face. She looked so small, like someone had reached into her chest and pulled the air out of her lungs. "She's not a lawn ornament," I snapped. "You can't just, what? Cut her hair without asking?" Karen made a tisk sound, shaking her head like I was the one overreacting. "This neighborhood has standards. Appearances matter. She was sitting out here every morning, looking like a witch." I took a step forward, fists clenched, but stopped myself. Not here. Not like this. My heart thundered in my chest as I knelt beside Grandma, brushing a lock of butchered hair from her sweater. "Come on," I whispered. "Let's get you inside." Karen folded her arms, unimpressed. I expect her to be more appropriate moving forward. This is a respectable community. I turned slowly, not trusting myself to speak. We helped Grandma into the kitchen. Her hands trembled as she sat down. I poured her a glass of water, and she sipped it without a word, eyes fixed on nothing. I hadn't seen her like this. Not since Grandpa died. Gardening was her therapy. She spent her mornings pruning the roses and her afternoons in the sun with a book. It brought color back to her cheeks. For the first time in months, she'd looked at peace. Now, she looked destroyed. "Why would she do that to me?" she finally asked, her voice barely audible. I crouched beside her, fighting the sting behind my eyes. "Because she's a power-hungry lunatic." "But it's just hair." "It's not just hair, it's dignity. And she took it from you." "That night, I filed a police report. Assault," I said. "Emotional abuse. Violation of personal boundaries." They nodded sympathetically and said they'd send someone by. They did. The officer looked tired. He knocked on Karen's door, talked to her for 5 minutes, then came back with a shrug. "She says she had your grandmother's permission." "She what?" "It's her word against yours," he said. "It's a civil matter, if you want to take it. Further, you'll have to go through small claims." She lied, and they let her. I watched through the blinds as Karen pruned her front hedges that evening, still wearing that smug smile, humming to herself like she hadn't just violated another human being. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my grandmother's face, shocked, ashamed, mutilated. She barely touched her dinner. She didn't even look at her garden. Karen had taken something far deeper than hair. She had made her feel invisible. The next morning, Grandma didn't go outside. I took her tea to the window seat where she sat, staring at the rosemary and the ruined lavender. I think I should sell the house, she said suddenly. Maybe I'm not meant to be here anymore. No. I sat beside her. She doesn't get to chase you away. She gave a small smile, the kind you wear when you've already accepted defeat. I don't have the energy for battles anymore. Sweetheart, not with people like her. And that's when I knew. If the system wouldn't make her pay, I would. Karen Wilkes wasn't born a villain. At least I like to believe she wasn't. But somewhere along the way, maybe during her 6th property flip, or after her 3rd failed bid for local office, she became the kind of person who measured her, worth in inches of grass length and the number of citations she could hand out in a day. She moved into the neighborhood 8 years ago, blonde bob stiff with hairspray, nails sharp enough to gut a fish. Within 6 months, she'd clawed her way to HOA president. 7 years later, she hadn't let go of the title. Rumor had it she'd rewritten the election bylaws to ensure her reign. Her reign. That's how it felt. Every mailbox had to be HOA-approved black. No string lights outside the holidays. Trash bins left out past 9 a.m. on pickup day? Fine. Porch furniture not in neutral tones? Fine. One time she fined a family for letting their kids draw chalk on the driveway. Graffiti, she called it. Another time she reported a neighbor's American flag as a visual disturbance. No one stood up to her. She had connections, married to a real estate broker who handled half the listings in town. She knew when people were moving in and when they were desperate to sell, and she made them desperate. Slowly, quietly, legally. Everyone hated her, but they hated her from a distance. I tried not to draw her attention. That's how most people survived here, by being invisible. Until Grandma moved in, my grandmother had always stood out. She wore embroidered cardigans and hummingbird earrings. She loved color, red tulips, cobalt pots, teal wind chimes. She turned our bland little yard into a vibrant patch of joy. The neighbors loved it. Karen did not. Even before the incident. With the shears, Karen had made her disapproval clear. She's violating the aesthetic uniformity of the community, she'd once declared at an HOA meeting, glancing pointedly at our marigolds. It's giving chaos. I remembered the way Grandma had blinked at that. I thought it was giving life, she said softly. I'd laughed. Karen hadn't. After she hacked Grandma's hair, I tried the official channels. I submitted a written complaint to the HOA board, complete with photos and the timestamp from my security camera. It showed Karen arriving with the shears and leaving minutes later, but the actual act happened off frame. Still, it was something. I received a reply 2 days later. A single sentence. After review, we find no actionable violation of HOA policy. No apology, no follow-up. Just silence. Then came the fine, a yellow slip in our mailbox. $200. Public disturbance, HOA disruption. According to Karen, Grandma's screaming episode had alarmed multiple neighbors and disrupted the serenity of the street. I tore the letter in half. My grandmother, who once marched for civil rights, who taught kindergarten for 30 years and still believed in handwritten thank you notes, was being punished for reacting like a human being to an assault on her body and dignity. That's when I started paying attention. Karen didn't just enforce the rules, she weaponized them. She knew every loophole, every technicality, and if there wasn't one, she'd invent it. She had turned the HOA into her personal fiefdom, with herself as queen and her clipboard as sword. She didn't expect resistance, not really, not from people like me. So I visited a few neighbors, just to ask. One of them, Mr. Levin, showed me the notice Karen sent after his grandson's soccer ball hit her hydrangeas. Repeated property damage, final warning. Another neighbor, Anna, had been fined for excessive wind chimes. 3 in total. She showed me the receipts. She counted them, Anna whispered, from the sidewalk. I started documenting everything: dates, times, complaints, fines, even HOA newsletters. I noticed patterns, inconsistencies, lies. It wasn't about rules. It was about control and fear. But Karen had grown careless, too comfortable in her throne, and she'd made a mistake. She targeted the wrong grandmother. My grandmother was quiet, gentle, but she wasn't weak. After a few days in her room, curtains drawn, I found her sitting at the kitchen table with an old photo album open and a pair of sewing scissors beside her tea. "I thought maybe I could shape what's left," she said, smiling faintly. I sat with her. We trimmed the jagged parts, blending what Karen had ruined. I asked if she wanted me to take her to a salon. "No, let them see what she did," she said. "Let them feel it." That was the moment I understood. She wasn't giving up. She was waiting for me. Karen had turned our home into a battleground, but she hadn't silenced us. She had simply awakened something. I wasn't going to file another complaint. I was going to build a case, not for the HOA, not for the police, for the court of public opinion, for the neighbors who'd been silenced, for the woman sitting beside me, sipping Earl Grey and plotting her quiet revenge. Karen thought she had won, but she hadn't yet seen what we were capable of, and I couldn't wait to show her. The plan started small, just whispers over hedges and quiet conversations during morning walks. I wasn't trying to lead a revolution. I just wanted people to see Karen for what she was, for what she'd done. And slowly, the stories began to pour in. There was Eli, a retired Navy veteran whose backyard bird feeders were deemed unsightly debris. He'd received 3 fines and a formal HOA letter calling them potential vermin attractants. Then Nisha, a single mother of 2, whose kids' sidewalk chalk murals were classified as vandalism. Karen had personally hosed them off while the children cried. And then Mr. Donaldson, the widower on the corner lot, who had been penalized for having a rose trellis not matching neighborhood aesthetic, even though it had been there longer than Karen had lived here. Everyone had a story. Everyone had proof. I compiled it all: emails, photographs, voice memos, video clips of confrontations, even a few hidden camera recordings from neighbors who were too nervous to go on record, but desperate to see her stopped. I created a private group chat, Neighborhood Watchdog. People joined quietly, then actively. We shared experiences, timelines, documents. The depth of her control and the number of people she'd hurt was staggering. Karen ruled by isolation, but together we weren't isolated anymore. Still, I needed a spark, something that couldn't be brushed off, something public. The chance came sooner than I expected. Every spring, the HOA hosted a garden showcase. It was Karen's pride and joy, a weekend where judges she handpicked awarded ribbons to the best-kept lawns and floral arrangements. It was the Super Bowl for suburban perfectionists. Karen always won. She had a white rose wall so aggressively manicured it looked sculpted from porcelain. She even paid a landscaping company to replace her grass every 2 years for optimal color. But this year she was planning something bigger: a speech, a social media live stream, even an article in the local paper. A spotlight she couldn't resist. Perfect. The night before the event, I stayed up until 3 a.m. editing the video. It started with a soft piano track. Then, a slow fade-in. My grandmother, looking into the camera, her hair still uneven, her eyes clear and steady. "My name is Eleanor," she said, "and a woman named Karen Wilkes assaulted me." I cut between her narration and the footage, before and after clips of her hair, the surveillance video of Karen entering with the shears, photos of the fines, and clips of neighbors sharing their own experiences. No drama, no exaggeration. Just facts, faces, fear, and pain. It ended with a simple message. This is what happens when no one says anything. This is what stops when we finally do. I posted the video across neighborhood forums, Facebook groups, and our HOA community board. I even submitted it anonymously to a local watchdog page that loved stories about suburban injustice. The morning of the showcase arrived like any other. Dew on the grass, coffee brewing, robins hopping along fences. But there was tension in the air, like a thunderstorm hiding behind blue skies. I walked with Grandma to the event. She wore her Sunday best, navy slacks, a cream blouse, and a brooch shaped like a sunflower. Her hair, still visibly hacked, was held back with a silk scarf. Karen spotted us immediately. Her eyes narrowed, lips pulling into that thin, frosty smile. She stood beneath a decorative pergola with gold-trimmed banners that read, Garden Glory, 2025. "How charming," she said, gaze raking over my grandmother. "Didn't expect you to show." Grandma smiled. "Wouldn't miss it. I hear you've outdone yourself this year." Karen's eyes flicked sideways, uncertain. Then it began. The murmurs, people checking their phones, brows furrowing, neighbors whispering and nudging each other. A couple even pointed, not at the roses, but at Karen. She glanced around, visibly confused. Then a teen, Nisha's daughter, walked by holding her phone out, not even trying to be subtle. "Hey," she said loudly, "is it true you cut that old lady's hair and then lied to the cops about it?" Karen paled. "What are you talking about?" she snapped, but her voice trembled. "Check Facebook," someone called from the sidewalk. "It's all over the neighborhood group. Over 500 shares." Karen turned toward me. Her face, usually mask-like and composed, was twitching now, struggling between denial and fury. "You did this!" "No," I said. "You did this!" "I just gave people a mirror." She stormed off, shoulder-checking a hedge. 10 minutes later, the local news van rolled in. A reporter stepped out, mic in hand, accompanied by a cameraman. "We received several tips about HOA abuse," he said, looking directly at Karen. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Then she tried to smile. "I don't speak to the press without counsel. I almost felt sorry for her." Almost. Later that afternoon, an emergency HOA meeting was called. For the first time in 8 years, Karen was not the one holding the gavel. Her resignation was announced within 24 hours. As the sun set, Grandma and I sat on the porch, sipping lemonade while the lavender swayed gently in the breeze. The air felt cleaner somehow. "Do you think it's really over?" she asked. I shook my head. "No, people like her never disappear. But now, she knows we're not afraid of her anymore." Grandma smiled, eyes twinkling. Then she leaned in. "I forgot to mention something." "What?" She lifted a brow. "Karen never knew I'm the mayor's mother." I choked on my drink. "Wait, what?" She never asked, just assumed I was some fragile old woman, but I always liked to keep a low profile. The laugh we shared echoed down the block, light and free. For the first time in weeks, it felt like home again. The fallout was swift, and for the first time in her meticulously curated life, Karen Wilkes couldn't control the narrative. Within a week, the video had made its way beyond the neighborhood, picked up by a local investigative podcast, then a citywide news station. The headline read, "HOA Tyrant Cuts Elderly Woman's Hair, Didn't Know She's the Mayor's Mother." It had a perfect storm of outrage, injustice, and poetic irony. People couldn't resist sharing it. Karen tried damage control. She issued a statement through a lawyer, something vague about miscommunication and deep regret for any misunderstandings. But it was too late. Her pristine image cracked like glass under a boot. The community she'd ruled with clipped lawns and silent threats now treated her like a pariah. Neighbors she used to bark orders at now crossed the street to avoid her. Even her husband's real estate listings started dropping off websites. But the final blow? That came at the city council meeting 2 Fridays later. Grandma stood beside the mayor, her son, though until that moment, Very few had made the connection. The mayor, tall and composed, took the podium first. My mother is one of the kindest, most community-minded people I know. She's volunteered with the public library, taught 3 generations of children, and still finds time to bake for the food pantry. He paused, the weight of his words measured. She didn't want to bring this to me. She thought it would be handled by the systems already in place. But when those failed her, she didn't stay silent. She stood up. Then he motioned for Grandma. She stepped forward, wearing a seafoam blouse and her hummingbird earrings. Her hair had started to grow back, still uneven but proud, like wildflowers after a storm. When I moved in with my grandson, I expected a quiet life, she began. A porch, some flowers, a community. What I didn't expect was to be treated like I didn't belong, like I was a stain to be scrubbed out of someone's vision of perfection. She looked directly at Karen, who sat several rows back, sunglasses hiding her eyes, but not the rigid tension in her jaw. I don't speak today for myself, Grandma said, her voice steady. I speak for the children who weren't allowed to draw, for the veterans who were harassed over bird feeders, for the people too afraid to plant roses, hang wind chimes, or just be who they are. This woman, this bully, used power not to serve, but to control. The room burst into applause. Even a council member wiped a tear. That same day, an ethics investigation was launched into the HOA's practices. Karen's history of overreach, backdoor amendments, and unapproved citations came under review. It turned out she'd fabricated more than a few complaints, ones that never went through a formal vote, but had resulted in fines and even forced sales. The city revoked the HOA's authority to issue penalties until a new board could be formed, one voted in transparently with term limits and oversight. Karen was disqualified from ever holding a position again. And yet through it all, she never apologized. Not once. Instead, she packed up in the dead of night. The for sale sign appeared without warning, a sad little symbol stuck in a lawn that hadn't been watered in weeks. Rumor had it she moved across town into a gated community. No HOA, ironically. We didn't throw a party when she left. We didn't need to. Victory came in quieter moments, like when Mr. Levin put up a new bird feeder without flinching. Or when the kids down the block drew a chalk mural that spanned 4 driveways and no one complained. Or when Nisha strung fairy. Lights across her porch and the whole street showed up for cocoa that evening just to bask in them. Grandma planted new flowers, dahlias and poppies this time. Bold, unashamed colors. The wind chimes rang again, this time joined by a few more from neighboring porches. The block started to feel less like a stage and more like a home. As for me, I learned something in all this. That sometimes the only way to stand up to tyranny is to see it. To stop pretending it's just someone being difficult. To stop swallowing your voice for the sake of keeping peace when peace is being used as a leash. And Grandma? She thrived. She started a neighborhood. Club, Garden Rebels, they called themselves. A loosely organized, fiercely cheerful group of people who loved messy flower beds, painted gnomes, and the simple joy of imperfection. Their motto? Let it bloom wild. One afternoon, weeks after the dust had settled, I found her on the porch, with a sketch pad sipping tea. Thinking of getting a pixie cut, she said, grinning. Take control back. I think it'd look great, I said, sitting beside her. She looked out at the street, where neighbors waved and laughed, dogs barked playfully, and wind chimes danced in the breeze. You know, she said, I almost didn't say anything. I almost let her get away with it. But you didn't, I reminded her. She nodded slowly, eyes glinting with that old fire. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not stay quiet. A bird landed on the railing. Blue feathers, bright, defiant. Grandma smiled at it. Even the birds are coming back, she said. And somehow, That felt like the final note in a song we didn't know we'd been singing all along. Not just a victory, a reclamation.